Hello and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for all English medium UPSC aspirants. Welcome to one more session in NCERT Fundamentals. In today's session, we will be discussing a very important topic, ecosystem. This covers the chapter 15, Our Environment from the 10th class Science NCERT and the chapter 14, Ecosystem from the 12th class Science NCERT. But before we proceed with the session, a very important announcement. We are launching a series of special classes on 5th and 6th of August. The series includes sessions on important topics by the expert faculty. For the complete schedule, click on the link given in the description. Let us now continue with our topic, ecosystem. Firstly, what is an ecosystem? Ecosystem can be defined as a community of interacting organisms and their physical environment. So the ecosystem is a group of organisms, interactions between these organisms plus their interactions with the physical environment. To understand more about it, let us discuss about pond as an example for ecosystem. Every ecosystem will have two components. The first one is abiotic component and the second one is biotic component. Abiotic component means the non-biological material in the ecosystem. In the pond ecosystem, the abiotic component includes water, the organic and inorganic material which is dissolved in that water, the nutrient-rich soil which is deposited at the bottom of the pond, the solar radiation, the cyclical variation of the temperature, day length, and the other climatic conditions. Means everything which is not a part of the living organisms is called the abiotic component. Now coming to the biotic component. Biotic component is living organisms. They can be classified into three categories. The first one is called as autotrophs. Autotrophs are those organisms that can produce their own food material using photosynthesis. And in the pond ecosystem, autotrophs are the phytoplankton. Then what is phytoplankton? The term plankton means any organism that is carried by the tides and currents of the water. Means any organism which is floating in the water can be called as a plankton. If the plankton is a plant material or autotroph, we call it as phytoplankton. And if the plankton is a heterotroph or an animal material, we call it as zooplankton. Phytoplankton is the autotrophs of the pond ecosystem. The second component is heterotrophs. Heterotrophs are those organisms that cannot produce their own food material. They cannot perform the photosynthesis. They feed upon the autotrophs. They can also be called as consumers. In the pond ecosystem, the consumers are the zooplankton. And the third component is decomposers. These are the organisms like bacteria and fungi that will decompose or disintegrate the organic material. All the three together is called the biotic component. Now, biotic component plus abiotic component plus all the interactions between these three components together is called as the ecosystem. Let us discuss one previous question from the ecosystem. The question is from the year 2015. Which one of the following is the best description for ecosystem? First statement is a community of organisms interacting with one another. What is missing in this statement? Abiotic component is missing. So this is a wrong statement. Next, the part of the earth which is inhabited by the living organisms. No, this is called as habitat. This is not ecosystem. So this is also wrong. The third statement is a community of organisms together with environment in which they live. This is the correct answer. C is the right answer. Now, let us try to understand what is production, productivity, etc. The first term we are discussing is production. Production can be two types. The first one is primary production and the second one is secondary production. Primary production is the total plant material. Total plant material which is produced per unit area in unit time. The total plant material which is produced per unit time in unit area is called as primary production. How this plant material is produced? Plant material is produced by a process called as photosynthesis. Okay. If primary production is the total plant material produced, then what is secondary production? Secondary production is the total animal material. Total animal material produced per unit area per unit time. Like for example, in 1 square kilometer, in 1 year duration, how much animal material is produced is called as secondary production. Then how the animal material is produced, how our body is built, our muscles, bones, all these are formed by consumption, not photosynthesis. So the secondary production happens by the process called as consumption. So primary production is a total plant material produced per unit time in unit area by the process called photosynthesis, and secondary production is the total animal material which is produced per unit time in unit area by the process called consumption. And there is another term called productivity. If production is the amount of matter produced, productivity is the speed of the production. The rate at which the production is happening is called as productivity. In the productivity, particularly in the primary productivity, we have two types. In the primary productivity, first we have gross primary productivity. Gross primary productivity is the total plant material which is produced. The total plant material produced. Right. Then the gross primary productivity minus respiration. Respiration means indirectly the total metabolism. The total metabolism. Whose metabolism? The plant's metabolism. The plant's metabolism process. The total plant material produced by the plant using the process called photosynthesis minus the plant material which is used by the plant for its own metabolism through respiration is called as net primary productivity. Gross primary productivity of an ecosystem is the rate of production of organic matter using the photosynthesis, and the gross primary productivity minus respiration, that is the plant material which is utilized by the plant itself for its own metabolism, for its own respiration, is called as the net primary productivity. So the net primary productivity is the available biomass for consumption. How much biomass is available in the plant for the consumption process? Like for example, if I take the total mango tree, the complete mango tree, I can consider it as GPP, the gross primary production. The gross primary production minus, okay, the non-available material. The non-available material. What is the non-available material in the mango tree? This is the stem, branches. We are not consuming the mango stem, we are not consuming the branches, we are not eating its roots. So, this is all the non-available material. What is the purpose of this material? The purpose of this material is the survival of the plant. The survival of the plant. Plant will utilize it for its own metabolism or respiration process. Okay, so this is non-available. Then what is the available part? What is the available biomass? in the example of a mango tree, the available biomass is only those mangoes, hardly 1%. Okay, this available biomass is called as the net primary productivity. Net primary productivity is the available biomass for consumption. How much plant material is available for the consumers to feed upon? That is called net primary productivity. Okay, who will consume this leftover, that is available plant mass is consumed by whom? The next level, that is the heterotrophs. The heterotrophs can also be called as the heterotrophs can also be called as herbivorous organisms like goat, rabbit, grasshopper. They consume this available plant biomass. Next, secondary productivity, we have already understood what is secondary productivity. The total animal material which is produced is called as the secondary productivity. Okay, now moving on to the decomposition. Decomposition is the disintegration or breaking down the complex material into simpler material. Disintegration or decomposition. Bacteria, fungi, etc. will perform this process called disintegration. In the disintegration or decomposition, we have a few steps. Let us understand them step by step. The first process, the first step is called as fragmentation. In the decomposition, the first step is called as fragmentation. So, what is fragmentation? The detrivores. Detrivores means what? The organisms that consume the detritus. Herbivore, consume the plant. Carnivore, consume the animal. Detrivore, consume the detritus. Then what is detritus? Detritus means what? The accumulated material. Accumulated material is called detritus. Is there a rule that only the organic material should be called as detritus? No. Even the loose gravel and the sand can also be called as detritus. So detritus means either organic or even the soil, loose gravel and the soil can also be called as detritus. It is the accumulated material. And the organisms that consume the detritus are called as detrivores. Detrivore is another name of the decomposers. These detrivores, they perform the process called decomposition, as we already understood. The first step in the decomposition is fragmentation. In the decomposition, the first step is fragmentation. What is fragmentation? Detrivores like earthworms, they break down the detritus into smaller particles. Detritus broken down into smaller particles is called as fragmentation. Detritus broken down into smaller particles. The second step in the decomposition is leaching. Water soluble inorganic nutrients will go down into the soil horizon. I mean, they will go into the deeper layers of the soil and will get precipitated at the bottom layers. And this material, this inorganic material is unavailable. Why it is unavailable? Because this inorganic material, the water soluble inorganic material, through water, it will drip into the deeper layers of the soil. Because it will settle at the deeper layers of the soil, it is not available. So this process of water soluble inorganic material dripping down into the deeper soil horizons is called as leaching. So the leached material is not available for the decomposers or any other organisms. The third step in the decomposition is called as catabolism. The third step is called as catabolism. The word catabolism means breakdown. Then fragmentation is also breakdown. Catabolism is also breakdown. What is the difference between these two? In fragmentation, only the bigger sized material is becoming smaller sized, but the nature is not changing. But here the chemical nature also changes. The chemical nature changes. Like for example, a protein will get broken down into amino acids. It's not becoming smaller pieces of protein. If it becomes smaller pieces of protein, fragmentation. If the protein is converted into simpler material called amino acids, that is called catabolism, breakdown. Okay. The bacterial and fungal enzymes. Enzyme is a biological catalyst. These enzymes will degrade the detritus into the simple inorganic substances. This process is called as catabolism. The fourth step in the decomposition is called as humification. Humification. Humification means humus formation. What is humus? This is a dark colored amorphous substance, fibrous amorphous substance which is in dark color is called humus, and the formation of humus is called humification. And humus is resistant to microbial action. It means these detrivores or the decomposers cannot decompose the humus easily. The humus will either not get decomposed or it will get decomposed at an extremely slow rate. Because it is amorphous, because it is fibrous, because it is not decomposing, it will act as a reservoir for the nutrients. For example, in the soil, if you have full of this humus, then what happens? All the nutrients will be trapped in the humus so that they are available for the growing plant. They are available for the growing plant. That is the purpose of this humus. Formation of humus is called humification. The next step, fifth step, is called as the mineralization. Mineralization. What is mineralization? The humus being colloidal in nature, it serves as a reservoir for the nutrients. This humus is further degraded. I did not say that it is impossible to degrade the humus, but the humus disintegration is a slow process. The humus is further degraded by some microbes, okay, by the release of certain enzymes, and the further degraded, the humus will get further degraded by some microbes and will release inorganic nutrients. The humus will undergo disintegration to form inorganic nutrients. That process is known as mineralization. Humus slowly decomposing to form inorganic nutrients is called as mineralization. This 5-step process is called decomposition. The rate of decomposition depends on various factors, the types of microbes present, the humidity, the temperature, amount of acid present in the soil, etc. For example, if the soil is rich in lignin and chitin, what are lignin and chitin? They both are organic polymers. Polymer means what? Like a chain. They both are organic polymers. Lignin is an organic polymer in the plants. Chitin is an organic polymer in the insects. Okay. So, if the soil is rich in lignin and chitin, then the decomposition will be very slow. The detritus will be decomposed slowly if the soil is rich in lignin and chitin. Same way, the decomposition will be very fast if the detritus is rich in nitrogen and water soluble substances like sugars. If the soil is rich in sugars, quick decomposition. If the soil is rich in lignin and chitin, slow decomposition. Okay. Not only the composition of the soil, also temperature, humidity, these factors also influence the rate of this decomposition. And one more factor is anaerobiosis. Anaerobiosis means what? The life in the absence of air. We have anaerobic organisms. Anaerobic organisms, they do not require air. Particularly, they can live in the absence of oxygen. If the soil is rich in anaerobic organisms, then the decomposition will be very slow. It will lead to the accumulation of the material. Why the decomposition is slow if the soil contains anaerobic organisms? Because decomposition requires oxygen. The process of decomposition, this 5-step process, fragmentation, leaching, catabolism, humification, mineralization, this 5-step process decomposition requires oxygen. So if the soil is anaerobic, having lesser amount of oxygen, then also the decomposition will be slow. So these are the different factors that will influence the rate of decomposition. Now moving on to the next topic called as energy flow. To understand energy flow, we need two components, two concepts. One is food chains and second one is ecological pyramids. Ecological pyramids. First, let us try to understand what is a food chain. The food chain is of two types. First one is grazing food chain. Grazing food chain. Grazing food chain will start with the process of photosynthesis, that is, it will start with plant. The second type of food chain is called detritus food chain. Detritus food chain. This type of food chain will start with the death of the organism. When any organism dies, then the detritus food chain will begin. So let us now try to understand what is grazing food chain, what is detritus food chain, and what is a food chain. Look at here, this is a grazing food chain. For example, the first step is grass. Then a grasshopper will eat the grass. And a bird will eat the grasshopper. And then the bird will be eaten by the snake. Then the snake will be eaten by the owl. This is called as a food chain because it is a chain, like a chain. One organism is feeding upon the other organism. So we call it as food chain. Then why it is called grazing food chain? Grazing means eating. And these organisms are eating one another. The owl is eating the snake. Snake is eating the bird. Therefore, it is called grazing food chain. The other type of food chain is called as detritus food chain. As I told you, the detritus food chain will begin with the death of an organism. Which organism? All the components of the grazing food chain. I mean grass or the grasshopper or the bird or the snake or the owl. When any of these organisms die, then what happens? The bacteria and fungi will start decomposing this. So decomposition is the step 1 in the detritus food chain. Fine, we understood what is detritus food chain and what is grazing food chain. Is there any link between the two? Yes, a link is possible. Like for example, fungi are the decomposers. They will start the detritus food chain. And some animals will consume the fungi. How can we consume fungi? Interestingly, mushrooms are also fungi and we prepare so many delicacies with mushrooms. So animals will consume the fungi. It means, are animals decomposing the fungi? Do we decompose the fungi or do we eat the fungi? Do we eat the mushroom? Yes. So, this is a part of grazing food chain. The fungi from the detritus food chain are eaten by the animals in the grazing food chain. So, a link between detritus food chain and the grazing food chain is established. So, together it formed a food web. Food web. So, that is the story of food chain and the food web. In the food chains, always the energy will flow in the same direction. The food chains will have unidirectional energy flow. It means, look at this, is there any chance that The grass will get energy from the grasshopper? Is there any chance that the grass will get energy from the grasshopper? Impossible. The grass only can perform the photosynthesis. Grasshopper cannot perform photosynthesis. It cannot produce the food. So definitely grasshopper should be the producer and the energy should go from the grass. Okay, sorry, grass should be the producer. Okay, and the energy should definitely flow only from the grass to the grasshopper, and the reverse is impossible. So in the food chains, in the food webs, the energy always flow in the same direction. This is a story of food chains. Now about food chains, there are some previous questions. Let us discuss those questions. One question is from the year 2013, and the question is, with reference to the food chains in the ecosystems, consider the following statements. A food chain illustrates the order in which a chain of organisms feed upon each other. Correct. Food chains are found within the population of a species. Do humans eat each other? Do rabbits eat each other? Mostly organisms within the same species, they do not eat each other. So this is a wrong answer, wrong statement. A food chain illustrates the numbers of each organism which are eaten by the others. No, need not specify the numbers. So this is also not correct. The only right statement is 1. So the right answer is A. So food chain illustrates the order in which the chain of organisms feed upon each other. And this is that order as we have seen. Right? Then moving on to one more previous question. This question is also from the year 2013. Okay. With reference to food chains in the ecosystems, which one of the following kinds of organisms are known as decomposers? Okay. Virus, fungi, bacteria. Are the virus decomposers? No. In one of the previous session called microorganisms, I told you that viruses are not organisms at all. They are the threshold between life and non-life. Means they are non-living outside the host cell. Outside the host cell, they are non-living. So they cannot live in the soil to degrade the detritus. So this is wrong. Fungi and bacteria are the decomposers. Okay. So this is one more question related to the food chains. So we completed the detritus food chain, grazing food chain, and the link between the detritus food chain and the grazing food chain. Okay. And the link forming the food web. So these are the topics we have already understood. Now, let us see another term called as saprotrophs. Okay, troph means food. Sapro, the word sapro means decompose. So the decomposers are also called as saprotrophs. What they do? They release certain enzymes. These enzymes will disintegrate that material. The disintegrated material they consume, it means they don't digest the food inside the body. They first release the degradative enzymes. They digest the detritus outside the body. The digested simple organic material will be absorbed. Such organisms are called as saprotrophs. The detritus food chain may be connected with the grazing food chain at some levels like this. If you observe here, the detritus food chain is connected to the grazing food chain when the animals eat fungi like mushrooms. Okay. So, the detritus food chain may be connected with the grazing food chain at some levels. Okay. And these connections will form a concept called as food web. So, this is all about food chains and food webs. Now, let us discuss about an ecological pyramid. Okay. Ecological pyramids are three types: pyramid of numbers, pyramid of biomass, pyramid of energy. But in any ecological pyramid, listen this carefully, in any ecological pyramid, the bottom step is that of producers. What are producers? Autotrophs. Is it correct to call them as producers? No. Thermodynamics says that energy can neither be produced nor be destroyed. So they are not actually producing the energy. The best word used for them is transducers, because they only convert the solar energy into the chemical energy. They are not producing the chemical energy. They are converting the solar energy into the chemical energy. And in any ecological pyramid, the second step is consumers. And the third step is, secondary consumers. Secondary consumers. Consumers or the primary consumers are herbivores. They are called herbivores. Secondary consumers are called as carnivores. The primary consumers or the herbivores will eat the plant. Herbivore, they consume the plant, and carnivores will consume the animals. And in some ecosystems, you can also have tertiary consumers. Tertiary consumers are also possible. Like for example, in an ecosystem here, like if you see, for example here, if you take the example of producers as grass, then the primary consumer is a grasshopper. A grasshopper is a primary consumer. And then the bird is secondary consumer. The bird is secondary consumer. Then what do you call the snake which is eating the bird? That should be called as tertiary consumer. Then what you should call the owl which is consuming the snake? That should be called as quaternary consumer. Is it clear? So like this you can have many steps. But can you have 100 steps in one ecological pyramid? Not possible. Maximum you will have a few steps, 3 or 4 or 5 steps. Producer, grass. Herbivore, the primary consumer, grasshopper. Secondary consumer is the bird which is eating that grasshopper. Tertiary consumer, snake. Quaternary consumer, the owl. That's it, 5 steps. You cannot have 100 steps. I mean, you do not have any other species that will consume the owls. Why? What is the reason? In the ecological pyramid, there is a rule called as from one level. I mean, here if you have 100% energy, which is produced by the process called as photosynthesis, from this only 10% will go to the second level. And from this only 10%. 10% of 10% means what? Only 1% goes to the third level. It means fourth level will get only 0.1%, fifth level will get only 0.01%. It means, as the steps increases, the food material is not enough to feed one species. It means, in simple sentences, we do not have enough owls to feed another species, or we do not have enough tigers to feed another species. That is the reason why we do not have any species that will eat the tiger. We have tiger to eat the goat, but we don't have any animal to eat the tiger. Why? You don't have enough tigers to feed. If there is no animal to eat the tiger, then also the tigers are endangered. Just imagine if there is another species to eat the tigers, it is not possible. In the ecological pyramids, energy from one level to the next level goes only by 10%. So after fourth level, at the fourth level you have only 0.1%, at the fifth level you have only 0.01%. After that you don't have enough energy to support one entire species. That is the reason why the number of steps in the ecological pyramid is always limited to 3 or 4 or 5. Okay. And a little more terminology. Okay. This primary consumer, the primary consumer is called herbivore, and the secondary consumer can be called as carnivore, and this can be more appropriately called as primary carnivore. Primary carnivore, like for example, okay, herbivore example, let us take grasshopper. Then the primary carnivore is that bird. Okay, this is the first animal, first level of animal that is eating another animal. It is a carnivore, but first carnivore. But secondary consumer. Why secondary consumer? Because herbivore will eat the plant, then herbivore, then comes the consumer. So therefore it is called secondary consumer, because herbivore becomes the first consumer. The secondary consumer is called primary carnivore. And the tertiary consumer can be called as secondary carnivore. Okay, the example here is the snake. Or the quaternary consumer can also be called as tertiary carnivore. Example, owl. And that's all. You cannot go on increasing because you don't have enough owls to feed another species. Okay, so this is some terminology. Now let us discuss the types of ecological pyramids. We have understood basics about the pyramids. Now let us see the types of ecological pyramids. Okay, we have different types of ecological pyramids. First one is pyramid of numbers. Pyramid of numbers. For example, if you take a grassland, okay, compare the number of grass plants. Number of grass plants will be more when compared to the grasshoppers. Do you agree? Okay, grasshoppers number will be less. The number of grass plants is more, grasshoppers are lesser than the number of grass plants. Okay, and then the birds are much more lesser than the grasshopper. And that is number of birds, not the weight of the birds. Number, only when the number you count. Okay, and then after that the number of snakes will be further lesser. So, okay, the grassland ecosystem, the ecological pyramid of numbers in grassland, the pyramid of numbers in the grassland is upright. This is upright pyramid. Okay, but if you take the pyramid of biomass, okay, then the grassland can be an inverted pyramid. Okay, because this owl's number or the snake, weight, okay, the owls or the snakes weight can be more than the weight of, okay, can be more than. So here one important point that we should remember is, whatever might be the shape of the pyramid, the bottom level is always that of the producer. Whatever, the pyramid shape can be upright or inverted, but the bottommost step is always that of the producer. So here we have to take the weight of the grass weight compared to the weight of the snakes or owls, etc. Their weight will be more than the weight of the grass. So when you take the pyramid of biomass for grassland, it is an inverted pyramid. Inverted pyramid. Okay, but so it means what? A pyramid of numbers or the pyramid of biomass can be either upright or inverted. Sometimes it is upright, sometimes it is inverted. For example, if you take a forest, in the forest you have heavy tree. So if you take the pyramid of biomass, okay, then the weight of the trees will be definitely more than the weight of some rabbits which are eating those trees. So it means this step will be broader and this step will be narrow. Why it is narrow? Because the weight is decreasing. So the forest ecosystem of biomass is an upright pyramid, but the same forest pyramid of numbers, if you take, I mean forest, okay, if you take pyramid of numbers, then it will be inverted because the number of trees will be lesser than the number of rabbits. And the number of rabbits, okay, so therefore, okay, here the number of trees will be less, so narrow shape, and the number of rabbits will be more, so this will become broader. So it means if you take the pyramid of biomass in the forest, it is upright. If you take the pyramid of numbers in the same forest, it can be inverted. Grassland, if you take pyramid of numbers, is upright. Pyramid of biomass will be inverted, or skewed pyramids are also possible. Like if you observe, you can have some skewed pyramids, like for example, okay, one step will be broad, second step will be narrow, third step is again broad. This is called as skewed pyramid. Skewed pyramid. So pyramids of number, pyramids of biomass can be either upright or inverted or skewed, but the third type of pyramid is called pyramid of energy. This is called pyramid of energy. Pyramid of energy is always upright. Pyramid of energy is always upright. Okay, why? What is the reason? I told you that there is no chance that the consumers can have more energy than the producers, because they are getting energy from the producers. So how can they have more energy than the producers? So definitely pyramid of energy is always upright. There is no chance that the consumers have more energy than the producers. They have only 10% of the energy when compared to the energy in the producer level. So the pyramid of energy is always upright. So here are some examples. Pyramid of numbers for grassland, pyramid of numbers for temperate forest, pyramid of biomass, okay, for a lake, okay, for a coral reef. Pyramid of energy is always upright. We need not give the example. Any example you take, it is upright. That is about the ecological pyramids. The next topic we are discussing is succession. The next topic we are discussing is succession or ecological succession. What is ecological succession? This image will explain the ecological succession. For example, this is just some rock. Okay. First what happens? Only some lichens. What are lichens? Lichens are a kind of a symbiotic relation between algae plus fungi. This combination is called lichens. What they do? They will break down this rock material into loose soil. They will break down the rock material into loose soil. So this is called as the first shear or the first shearal stage. First shear or the first shearal stage. In the first shearal stage, you have only lichens and mosses. Later what happens? Okay, more diversity increases here. Okay, other types of plants will start growing. For example, here you have 2 types. In the second level you have 4 types. In the third level you have 5 types. More types of plants are growing. Moreover, more varieties of plants are growing and taller trees are growing. So the final stage of succession is this final seral stage is also called as the climax stage. The climax stage or the final seral stage is nothing but the forest. So the succession will start with the lichens and will end with the formation of a forest. Let us try to see more about the ecological succession. The gradual and fairly predictable changes. We can expect what kind of changes will occur here. The gradual and fairly predictable changes in the species composition of the given area. The species composition is changing. In the first seral stage you have only 1 or 2 species. In the next seral stages you have more species. Also more complex species, bigger animals, bigger plants will be there. Okay, so that gradual and fairly predictable change in the species composition of a given area is called as ecological succession. During succession, some species colonize an area and their population becomes more numerous, whereas population of the other species will decline or disappear. It means every organism which arrives here need not be successful in the succession. Some of them will grow in the number, the others will decline or will disappear. The entire sequence of communities that successively change in a given area are called as seers. So what are the seers? Like this is seer number 1, this is seer number 2, this is seer number 3, this is seer number 4 or the seral stage number 4. Each stage is called as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. These are the seral stages. Okay. So, the entire sequence of communities that successively change in a given area are called as seers. The individual transitional communities are called seral stages or seral communities. So, this is one seral stage or seral communities. This is a second seral community. This seral community is more complex when compared to this seral community. Okay. So, the individual transitional communities are termed as seral stages or the seral communities. In the successive seral stages, there is a change in the diversity of the organisms. It means what? The first seral stage will be less diverse. The last seral stage will be more diverse. So, there is a change in the diversity of organisms. There is an increase in the number of organisms. Also, there is an increase in the variety of organisms. More number and more types of organisms will be formed in the successive seral stages. That is about the succession. And what is the difference between succession and evolution? Succession and evolution. For example, evolution is, okay, if the monkeys evolve into human beings, I mean monkeys are changing into human beings, that is called evolution. But what is succession? Monkeys are already living, now human beings also will come there and other animals also will come there, that is called as succession. So succession means increase in the number of species or the variety of the species, whereas evolution is one species changing into the other. In the succession, that species will be there, other species will add to it, increasing the number of species or the diversity of the organisms. That is the difference between succession and evolution. They both will occur simultaneously. Okay, so that process is called as succession. Now, succession of the plants. Based on the nature of habitat, whether it is water, okay, or desert, We call the succession as hydrarch, xerarch. What is hydrarch? This is succession in water. What is xerarch? This is succession in desert. And pioneer species. What do you mean by pioneer species? Here, this lichens, the algae and fungi combinations, they are the pioneering species, founders, those organisms that first appeared on this rock, okay, which is previously uninhabited. It is a barren rock. There is no life on that. On that, the first organisms that are growing are called as the pioneer species, and with only the pioneer species we call it as the first seral stage. When you have only the pioneer species, we call it as first seral stage. The primary succession on the rocks which are previously uninhabited, it means if there is a rock and on the rock previously there was no living organisms at all, on that kind of a rock if the succession begins, we call it as primary succession. There is another term called as secondary succession. What is secondary succession? In secondary succession, what happens is, for example, there is a rock on which succession already occurred, but due to some reasons, okay, all that living organisms disappeared, they vanished due to some reason, maybe drought or some extreme climatic conditions, they all disappeared. And on this rock, means for this rock, the succession is not occurring for the first time. On this rock, the succession already occurred, but the living organisms disappeared. Now the succession is occurring again. Then we call this as secondary succession. So I repeat, on a barren rock which is previously uninhabited, if the lichens will grow on that and will start the process of succession, that process is called as succession. And when you have only lichens, when the diversity is very less, number of organisms are less, number of species is also less. I mean diversity, different variety of organisms is also less. And that is the first seral stage. With each seral stage, the number of organisms will increase, the number of species also will increase. It means the diversity is increasing. This process is called as succession. Primary succession occurs on the rock for the first time. Secondary succession is on that rock the succession already occurred but the living organisms disappeared due to some reason. Now the succession is again occurring. That is called secondary succession. The final seral stage is called as climax. The final seral stage is called as climax. And if you remember, hydrarch is a succession in the water. Xerarch is a succession in the desert. But whatever happens, finally it will form a mesic community. The word meso means middle. It is not as wet as a water body. It is not as dry as a desert after the succession is completed. Okay, if the succession is hydrarch, means succession occurring in the water, or the succession is the xerarch, that is succession occurring in the desert, in both the cases, what is formed? Forest is formed. So this is called a mesic community. Not as dry as a desert, not as wet as a water body. So this is about primary and secondary succession. And also we understood about the difference between evolution and succession. Evolution is one organism, one species is changing into the other species. Okay, we can also call it as speciation. Whereas succession is one species is not changing into the other species, more species are adding to it so that the ecosystem will become more complex. That is called succession. Now let us see a few previous questions. The question from 2013. In the grasslands, trees do not replace the grasses. What we studied about succession? Finally, the trees, look at here, finally the trees replaced the grass, isn't it? In the succession, the trees will replace the grass, but it will happen in the forest. In the forest, the trees are replaced by the trees are replacing the grass. But if you take a grassland, in the grassland, the grass is not replaced by the trees. A grassland is not growing into the forest. What is the reason? That is the question here. Okay. So, in the grassland, trees do not replace the grasses. I mean climax, the last cirral stage also do not have the trees in the grassland. The reason is because of the limitation of water and the frequent fires. That is, if the trees are growing, the forest fires are burning them. And also you don't have enough water for the huge trees to grow. This is the reason why in the grassland, the grass is not replaced by the trees as the final stage of the succession. The final stage of the succession is also the grass only. It's not replaced by the trees. That is one question. Let us see one more previous question. This is from the year 2014 and this is about lichens. What are the lichens? The pioneer species, or the first species in the ecological succession. The first species in the ecological succession. What are the lichens? Algae plus fungi, a symbiotic relation between algae and fungi are called as lichens. Now, the next topic we are discussing is nutrient cycling. The nutrients will get cycled like carbon cycle, nitrogen cycle, phosphorus cycle, water cycle. That is called nutrient cycle. The amount of nutrients such as carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, calcium present in the soil at any given time is called standing state. Okay. Another term, memorize it. What is standing state? Standing state means the amount of nutrients like carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, calcium present in the soil. The amount of nutrients present in the soil is called standing state. Okay. And it varies in different kinds of ecosystem and also depends on the seasons. In some ecosystems, the standing state is more. It means that is nutrient rich. In some ecosystems, the standing state is less. Means you have lesser amount of the nutrients. You have lesser amount of the nutrients. And these nutrients are never lost. Why? Law of conservation of mass. Material can neither be created nor be destroyed. Okay. So, these nutrients will never get lost completely, but they will only get recycled. And the movement of the nutrient elements through various components in an ecosystem is called as nutrient cycling. The movement of the nutrients through various components in an ecosystem is called nutrient cycling. Another name of nutrient cycling is biogeochemical cycle. Biogeochemical cycle. For example, if you take carbon, sometimes the carbon is in the soil, sometimes the carbon is in the living organisms, right? So this is bio, this is geo. It means the carbon is cycling between biological and geological components of the ecosystem. So therefore, we call this as biogeochemical cycle. And these biogeochemical cycles or the nutrient cycles are two types. Gaseous cycles, okay, like for example, nitrogen cycle, okay, and sedimentary cycles, like for example, phosphorus cycle, carbon cycle, okay. Gaseous cycle means it is only in the air, it is not in the form of sediment, okay. And the reservoir for the gaseous nutrient cycles is atmosphere. I mean all these gases. What is the reservoir for all the gases? Atmosphere. And what is the reservoir for all the sediments? What is the reservoir for the sedimentary nutrient cycles? That is the earth's crust. The reservoir for gaseous nutrient cycles is atmosphere. The reservoir for sedimentary nutrient cycle is the earth's crust. Okay. The environmental factors like moisture, pH, temperature, etc. will decide the rate of this nutrient cycle. These factors will decide the rate of the nutrient cycle. Now, we understood what are nutrient cycles that are also called as biogeochemical cycles, and there are two types: gaseous cycles, sedimentary cycles. For gaseous cycles, the reservoir is atmosphere. For the sedimentary cycles, the reservoir is soil. Now, okay, let us see the examples of some cycles. The first one is carbon cycle. Carbon constitutes 49% of the dry weight of organisms, and it is next only to the water. In our body 70% is water, okay, and the dry weight of carbon is 49%. It is just second to the water. There is no other element which is more, okay, abundant, okay, in the biotic component. In the total quantity of global carbon, 71% of the carbon is dissolved in the ocean. So therefore, oceans are called as carbon sink. Ocean is called carbon sink. Carbon sink means what? Reservoir that will absorb and it will store the carbon. A reservoir that will absorb and store the carbon. 71% of the total carbon is in the ocean. This is the most important. Oceans are the most important carbon sinks. So, the ocean will regulate the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. How much carbon dioxide you have in the atmosphere is decided by the ocean. Atmosphere contains only 1% of the global carbon. And fossil fuels also are the reservoirs of the carbon. Ocean, fossil fuels are the main reservoirs of the carbon. The carbon cycling occurs like this. Okay, the carbon cycling occurs like this. Like for example, okay, if you take, okay, here you can observe the limestone. What is limestone? CaCO. Okay, so it means here you have the carbon, isn't it? Carbon. And dolomite. What is dolomite? CaMgCO3 twice. CO3. So here you have carbon. So these are the different types of stones. Is it clear? Also you have calcareous sediment. Calcareous sediment. What is calcareous sediment? The sediment containing calcium carbonate. Any sediment which is containing calcium carbonate. Carbonate is again carbon. Okay, so like this different sediments and rocks will contain the carbon. How it will come out? The decay of the organisms. Okay, decomposition, that is fragmentation. If you remember the first step in the decomposition, through that it comes out. Okay, and then what happens? Okay, the plants will take, the plankton or the plants, all these plants will take the carbon dioxide. In which process? Photosynthesis. The plants will take the carbon dioxide, okay, and use it for the synthesis of glucose, and then they will release the oxygen. So the plants and phytoplankton are taking the carbon dioxide. Is it clear? Okay, they are taking the carbon dioxide. Then what happens? The detritus food chain. The detritus food chain. Through detritus food chain, the decomposers will get carbon. Decomposers gets carbon from the plants through detritus food chain. They will decompose this plant material. Okay, and then this cow image you have here. What is this doing? It is, okay, consuming, consumer. The consumer will get the carbon from the plant through grazing food chain. Is it clear? Through grazing food chain, the consumer will get the carbon from the plant. Through detritus food chain, the decomposers will get the carbon from the plant. Okay, and the plant will get carbon from the atmosphere. And another source of carbon dioxide is the respiration. respiration. These decomposers and these consumers, all these organisms, what they do respiration. In the respiration we release carbon dioxide. That is how the carbon dioxide goes into the atmosphere. The other route for the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is burning of the plant. The plant contain carbon. When you burn the plants, the carbon goes into the atmosphere. And the carbon is also coming from the combustion of the fossil fuels. Respiration of decomposers, respiration of consumers, burning the forests, burning any plant or animal material, and the utilization of the fossil fuels, because fossil fuels are also rich in the carbon. Through all these things, the carbon dioxide enter into the atmosphere, and that is again consumed by the trees, phytoplankton, etc. for the process called as photosynthesis. So the carbon will keep getting cycled between the carbon sink ocean, the plant's primary producers, decomposers, consumers, atmosphere. This is called carbon cycle because it is getting cycled between, the rock like this. So can we call it as geo? And it is also there in the plant. So can we also call it as bio? So this makes it biogeochemical cycle or the gaseous cycle. We call it as gaseous cycle because carbon exists in the form of gas called as carbon dioxide. Okay. Now, let us see some previous questions. The sixth question in today's session. Okay. From this you can understand how important the ecosystem is. Okay. What is blue carbon? A recent question, 2021. Obviously, we can guess carbon captured by the oceans and the coastal climate is called as the blue carbon. Simple question. Next, another question from 2014. Which of the following adds carbon dioxide to the carbon cycle? What all will add carbon to the carbon cycle? Volcanic action. Okay. How the volcanic action will release carbon? Because if you remember the rock like limestone, dolomite and the sediments, they all contain the rock. So when the volcano bursts, when the volcano erupts, what happens? All these the trapped carbon will be released into the atmosphere. So yes, one is correct. Respiration, yes, correct. Carbon dioxide we exhale, correct. Photosynthesis, no. Photosynthesis consumes. Photosynthesis consumes CO2. It is not releasing. It is not adding carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. Decay of the organic matter, yes. The detritus food chain will bring the trapped carbon from the organisms by the process called decomposition. So 1, 2 and 4 is the right answer. 7 questions. Okay. And the last one we are discussing is phosphorus cycle. The phosphorus is a major constituent of the biological membranes. In one of the first class we discussed the cell structure. In that we understood that every cell is bound by a cell membrane. This cell membrane is composed of phosphorus. We have phosphorus in the cell membranes, biological membranes. We have phosphorus in the nucleic acids. For example, if you take DNA, DNA is made up of nucleotides. Nucleotide contains a nitrogenous base plus one sugar plus phosphate. These three together is called as one nucleotide. DNA and RNA, that is nucleic acids, are made up of phosphorus. Phosphorus is present. And energy transfer also, ATP. I hope you know about this. ATP is called the energy currency of the cell. Energy currency of the cell. And ATP, adenosine triphosphate. Adenosine triphosphate, that is the ATP. So we have phosphorus in our nucleic acids, in our biological membranes, in our energy components like ATPs. Okay, in all these things we have the phosphorus. Many animals also need large quantity of phosphorus to make their shells. Like snails we have. shells, seashells. So those shells are made up of phosphorus. Our bones are made up of phosphorus. Our teeth also contain phosphorus. So we all need large quantities of phosphorus. So this phosphorus cycle happens in 3 steps. The step 1 is when the rocks are weathered. It means when the rocks will get broken down into smaller pieces like soil. When the rocks are weathered, minute amount of the phosphorus will dissolve in the soil solution. When the rock is weathering, means rock is getting converted into soil, then the soil solution, that is the water, okay, the phosphorus in the rock, the phosphorus in the soil will get dissolved in that water, that is the soil solution. Is it clear? That is the first step. Second step, the herbivores and other animals obtain this element from the plants. Okay, see, first step is a rock is undergoing weathering. It will become soil. Then the phosphorus from this rock or the soil will enter into the soil solution, that is water. Second step, the plant will absorb this water through roots. So the phosphorus enters into the plants. Third step, the consumers will eat these plants. So the consumers will get phosphorus from these plants. And when the waste products, when these plants, animals die, okay, through the process of decomposition, humus formation, the phosphorus will again reach the soil. Okay, this is called phosphorus cycle. One difference is, okay, here it is not entering into the atmosphere. So if you observe here, rock minerals, from the rock minerals, the phosphorus goes into the soil solution, and then the plant will take from the soil solution, the phosphorus will be taken by the plants, and consumers will take the phosphorus from the plants. From the plants and consumers, the phosphorus will go into the detritus. Through the detritus, it will reach the soil back. So this is a sedimentary cycle, bio-geochemical cycle. This is geo, this is bio, nutrient cycle, bio-geochemical cycle, sedimentary cycle. Okay, and the differences between carbon cycle, phosphorus cycle we already discussed, that is phosphorus do not enter into the atmosphere. It is not a part of respiration. We are not releasing phosphorus in the respiration. Next, one more previous question. Okay, in the case of which one of the following biogeochemical cycles, weathering of the rock is the main source of release of the nutrients? We just discussed it is phosphorus cycle. How the phosphorus comes out? When the rock undergoes weathering, when the rock becomes a soil, then the phosphorus will enter into the soil solution. The last topic in today's session is the ecosystem services. Ecosystem services means the services provided by the ecosystem to us. Like for example, okay, a healthy ecosystem is the basis for wide range of economic and environmental and aesthetic goods. Okay, how beautiful the forest is, all those things. The products of ecosystem or the ecological processes are called as ecosystem services. So that's all about the ecosystem. This is what I wanted to discuss. Thank you so much. Thank you.